What's up everyone, it's Mick Schultz. You may know me from producing songs for artists like Rihanna, Kelly Clarkson, Zendaya, and Jeremih. Jeremih and I met back when we were teenagers in college, and one of the first songs we ever released was called Birthday Sex. It hit #1 on Billboard, and from there, we did Down on Me featuring 50 Cent, Don't Tell 'Em featuring YG, and many more. For the first time ever, I'm going to break down how I produce, record, and mix for Jeremih, showing our new song, There You Go. Let's dive in.
There you go, there you go, there you go, there you go. Oh, 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 oh.
So this entire song was produced, recorded, and mixed in Pro Tools. I have a template set up where I can record and produce, and it's a bit more of a simpler approach. And then when I'm ready to mix, if I'm going to be the one to mix the song, I can just make the tracks active that I need to start mixing. And I have plugins on my mix bus, ones that I like to usually go reach for, and I can make those active. And I have a bunch of, effect sends in different groups that I can pull in and just kind of start mixing and diving deeper into the song. After I've organized the session and color-coded everything and cleaned up all the vocals and all the tracks are good to go, I'll start with adding something on the mix bus. And I do this because it gives me a way of kind of enhancing what I'm hearing and gives me a starting point on the mix, gives me a little bit of glue into what I'm hearing. So I'll work on the mix bus, and then once I have something that I like, I'll go into the individual tracks and start working from there, like start working on the kick and bass and, work on the vocal. But I like to start with the mix bus. It's nothing super surgical. It's very just like broad moves, some saturation, maybe some soft clipping. So if we look at the mix bus, we can see we have this SBL machine head. So I'm just adding a little drive, just like some saturation, and I'm boosting the highs just a little bit, giving it some top end, brings it to life a little bit. This Ruby, this is a WD Fern like software emulation of the VT5. I actually don't think I had this on at the beginning of the mix, but I added it. This is great for just adding some, sheen, some top end, or maybe doing small little cuts. This plugin sounds really good even when it's doing basically nothing. Then we go into the Gold Clip, which is an amazing plugin. This is pretty much on everything that I do nowadays. It's just to like catch some peaks that might be cutting through, can add some, loudness to the record. I see I'm boosting 2.6 dB, so I'm getting a little volume here. And, I have the Gold and Alchemy going, so it's kind of shaping the way it's doing the clipping and has some saturation. We have the God Particle, which I'm not using the limiter at all, or the EQ. I use this for my metering, so I can see if I'm clipping or if I'm too hot, if I don't have enough headroom. I like to start my mix with a lot of headroom because I know I'm going to get louder as I mix. So I like to start, whether it's -4 dB or -8 dB. I like to have a good amount of headroom, and then, I use the knob that Jason put in this thing, and it sounds amazing. So, this adds, size and width, and it excites the record and kind of just makes it feel mixed on its own. And then if we get into Ozone, this I also don't use at the beginning of the mix. It's just for kind of doing any final changes I might feel I want to do on the overall record. If we look at the EQ, I'm just doing some low end boosts, adding some weight to the record, dynamic EQ, kind of controlling a few small areas, not using the limiter at all on the song. So no limiting on this one. That's basically the mix bus. Let's listen to it and see what it's actually doing.
Plenty say love is an issue until you get somehow back in a position, baby, you're the loving. Booty itself is a tissue. Am I gonna dismiss it? Goddamn it, now listen, I'm gonna rub it. So tell me you don't wanna stop, baby, what we started. Hope it really don't stop no time soon. I look up you the star, baby, it's your stage. So there you go, there you go, there you go, there you go, there you go.
You can hear it's adding a lot of life. Like I said, it's the glue I'm mixing into it, so when it's off, things can fall apart. But this is working alongside all the different smaller moves that I'm making throughout the individual tracks. So my template is split up into two sections. I have all vocals and I have all music. I can easily solo the vocals.
Legs up in a peace sign.
I can solo the music. And I can also just make an easy adjustment, like turning all the vocals down.
When you there, I can't wait. I'll wait.
Just an easy way for me to clean up the session and organize the music and vocals into their own separate categories. It's basically how I have all my tracks set up as well throughout the session. I have a folder for all my vocal effects. I can open them up and I see all my vocal effects right here. I can close that. I have all my backgrounds. I can close them, open them. This is a more simple vocal production. There's not a lot going on, so I'm actually sending all the vocals just into one background bus. But on a song that has a lot more harmonies, maybe multiple artists or something like that, I'll have a lot of individual groups and I'll be sending each background part to its own group so I can treat it individually, and then I'll send that group to a main background bus. I like to think of each part, each vocal part, is kind of its own person. Even if you're thinking about verse, chorus, and pre, they could be sung drastically different, and so they might be treated differently as well. And the same goes for backgrounds. You know, pads, like oohs and ahs on a chorus, that is probably going to have a slightly different treatment to doubles or harmony stacks in a verse. So I like to split them up. And even if I do treat them all the same, splitting them up allows me to make minor adjustments easily, and it gives me, more stages that I can do those small changes and not affect everything all at once. So in this song, it is more simple. So all the backgrounds are going to one bus here, and there's, couple lead vocal tracks and some ad-libs, and those are all going to the lead vocal bus and then into all vocals. And then if we look at music, kind of a similar concept. I have everything broken up. All my bass is in one section, my drums. This song doesn't have really any percussion, so there's nothing in the percussion section. Same with effects. And then I have an all melodics section that's where synths, keyboards, guitars, all that stuff goes. And if it is more complex, I'll split it up into more groups, just like I would with backgrounds. But in this song, it's fairly simple, so they're all just going to one group, and I'm treating it from there. Most of the time, when there are drums in the song, I'll start the mix around the drums and have the drums be the foundation and starting point of the mix, and then I'll add in elements from there. So in this song, the drums are very simple. There's just a kick and a couple snap layers, and they're all going to a drum bus, and then that drum bus is going to a drum and bass bus. The drum and bass bus is where I can apply processing to the drums and bass together and kind of, marry them and glue them together. And then that just goes out to an all drums bus where I can, adjust the overall level or do anything I need. So I have a bunch of different stages. I can work on the drums. It allows me to have a lot of flexibility. With this mix, we're going straight into the drum bus, but we also have this track with all the NLS plugins on it. And this is something I like to keep in here ever since I saw Jason Joshua talk about it. Sometimes I'll use it, sometimes I don't. But let's hear exactly what it's doing, and you can see how it has a major effect, especially on the kick. So you can hear the kick's tone, the weight of it. It definitely changes a lot with this on. We're just running through a few plugins here. I have R-Bass, adding some harmonics, a little bit of compression from the Shadow Hills. This black box plugin I've been using on drums since, I don't know, for forever. It's always been in my template. So adding some saturation, this really works amazing on drums. We have some EQ. I'm actually taking out anything under 30 hertz. And I have a little attack boosting here just to add a little bit of attack to the snap and the kick. And then I am compressing the kick and the snap together. Once I kind of have that going, I'll go over to where the bass comes in. So I'll work the bass into the drums. And in this song, the bass chain is very similar to the drums, only I'm also compressing them a little bit. And I'm also compressing around 90 to 100 hertz to try to just control this little peak here that happens in the bass. So let's listen to the bass and the drums together. One last thing that's happening here on the drums and the bass is I'm sidechaining the kick to the bass. And with Soothe, because of how fast it works and because it can cut out the frequency the kick is actually occupying, it really lets the kick and the bass live together and breathe. And so in this song, whenever the kick hits, it's cutting from this bass, but it's so quick with Soothe, your ear doesn't really even notice that it's happening. Okay, so that's the kick and the bass. Once I have those things going, I can close them up if I want, just to stay organized. And the next step usually is I'll bring in one of the main melodic parts to the song. And in this, it's this pad here. So this pad basically takes up the whole record. It's probably why I didn't need to add much to it, because it fills up the whole frequency spectrum. It's wide, has a lot going on. So what I did here was I cut out some of the low end just in the sides. And this was because there was a lot of information going on and I wanted to just control that low end and keep it a little bit more mono. I added some top end. I did some more EQing. Cut out things that I just wasn't liking. Add some more top end, some air. Did some compression, fast attack, slow release, so it's clamping down quick, but it's hanging there, so it's not, you know, pumping on it. It's just kind of grabbing it and keeping control of it. Then just controlling the stereo width again, and then I'm using Shred Spread, which is an awesome plugin. This plugin really lets you kind of take the sound larger than life, like out of the speakers, really wide if you want. And I like to use automation on the spread function, so I can maybe bring the sound in a little more mono in the verse, and when the chorus comes in, I can make it really wide. So just with one sound, you're getting a lot of dimension, and your ear feels like, you know, something really special is happening because it's not staying in one place throughout the song. So I use this plugin a lot and I automate with it, and I'll play you guys what's happening with all these plugins and how it sounds with it and without it. I'm sure when I was working on this, once I brought the vocals in, I kind of worked on this to make sure it gave room for the vocals. So that's something I'll do a lot is, I'll apply some processing to the music. When I bring the vocals in, I'll listen to how the vocals and the music are competing and, are they working together or clashing? And then I'll go back to the music. And I always prioritize the vocal because the song is about the vocal and the story it's telling, regardless of how complex or simple the music is. I like to put the focus and the spotlight on the voice. So, if this pad's getting in the way of the voice or the voice is getting in the way of the pad, I'll do something to the pad to kind of get it out of the way of the voice. And I can do that with EQ or with panning or, volume, with filtering, all those sorts of things. This pad here is getting wider in the chorus, and I want you guys to hear how this spread feature really works. So let's listen. All right, so once we have the pad in, we have the drums, that's when I'll move over to the vocals, and I'll pretty much put in all the vocals at this point and then go back and fill in whatever other musical elements there are. Especially because this song was so simple, I know that the pad, the drums, and the bass kind of make up the whole song, and everything else is mostly ear candy. So let's check out the vocals. So I recorded Jeremih's vocals with 2 mics. The lead vocal, I used a Wonder CM7, and on his backgrounds, I used a Sony C800. And so those 2 mics sound drastically different, and by doing that, it creates a lot of separation in the lead from the backgrounds just from the recording process before, doing any treatment. When I'm recording him, I do my best to have it set up like I'm cutting the final vocal. This way, if he does a demo or his initial take has the magic in it, which often it does, we can still do new takes on a new day and comp between the demo and the new vocals. So we always kind of will have that demo there in the playlist in Pro Tools, and then I'll have him sing it many more times, and it gives me options because I like to go through every word, every breath, and just see, what is the best vocal performance that I can get. And worst case scenario, we always can fall back to the original take or the original comp, but I keep every recording, and keeping the demo ideas is super important, and recording them the same way I record the final vocal makes it really easy to choose what vocal you want to use in the final version. So right here we have the verse, and this vocal, like all the lead vocals that I have, they're all going to one lead vocal bus, and that allows me to treat all the lead vocals with, whatever I want to do. If I want to kind of brighten all the leads at once or do a little light compression to all the leads at once, makes it very easy. And all the vocal effects are going to its own chain. So I have the vocal effects separate from the dry vocals that are going into the all lead bus. And then those effects and the dry vocals go to an all vocal chain. So I have all these stages where I can affect, just the vocal effects, or I can process just the dry vocals and then bring them all together in one group. Let's listen to the vocal with the processing on and with it off. So here's with everything on it.
Plenty say love is an issue until you get somehow back in a position, baby, you're the lover. Booty is soft as a tissue, am I gonna dismiss it? Goddamn it, now listen, I'm gonna rub it. So tell me you don't wanna stop, baby, what we started.
And here's with no processing.
Plenty say love is an issue until you get somehow back in a position, baby, you're the lover. Booty is soft as a tissue, am I gonna dismiss it? Goddamn it, now listen, I'm gonna rub it. So tell me you don't wanna stop, baby, what we started.
So the first thing that I do on the vocal is I try to cut. I try to remove things like subtractive EQ, basically. I'll take some of the low end out, maybe cut out some of the low mids, and then take out any frequencies that might be bothering me. With Pro Q4, Pro Q3, it's super easy to just lose your mind and get carried away with cutting every little frequency that you hear. I try to do the least amount possible, and I'll bypass it and go back and forth for a while until I feel like, okay, this is, the least amount that I can do, and I think it's sounding good. So from that point, I might use a de-esser, which in this situation I am. So I'm cutting again, kind of getting rid of some of the sibilance. And then from there, I go into compression. So before I'm hitting the compressor, I am removing unwanted frequencies from the vocal so they don't take up any energy in the compression and they're already out of the way. And so on this vocal here, we have an R compressor, and then this R compressor is running into an RVox, just classic RVox. I've been using that since like the day I started recording, and it lands up on 90% of all my vocals. With this specific vocal, I'm compressing again a third time. I would rather use a lot of plugins and do very small moves than have just a few plugins and have them all work really hard. So, if I have to use three compressors or 3 EQs or whatever it is, if that's what's going to give me the most natural sound and the best sound, I'm cool with it. So I never worry about adding if it helps take the work off of some of the other plugins. So in this situation, I'm doing a little compression with the R compressor. I'm doing some compression with RVox, and then a little more with the LA2A. And that's kind of controlling the vocal. And then from there, I'm using this SSL to do some boosting, brighten up the vocal now, add character, bring it to life. So I've removed sibilance, compressed, now I'm adding some brightness. And then after that, on his vocal, I'm running it through this Studer A800. So I'm getting some saturation now, adding more character. And lastly, this IDX. So this is bringing the vocal forward even more. I kind of felt like even with everything I had going on, it needed a little more control in the dynamics, and I wanted to push it forward even more, so I used this IDX. Once I've done a mix on the lead, I'll go in and start adding some effects. All my effects are in one group. That allows me to add processing to all of them at once. I can turn them up, turn them down, and I can also mute them. I also can mute my lead vocal bus and all vocals and then just listen to the effects. So if I wanted to do that, I can hear exactly what's going on in the effects, and then I can add in the vocals.
It's a tissue, am I gonna dismiss it? Goddamn it, now listen, you know I'm gonna rub it. So tell me you don't wanna stop, baby, what we started.
And what we have going on the lead is a doubler. So that's adding a little bit of width. We have a ping delay. So that's just adding some more size and a little bit of rhythm, just some movement around the vocal. I have a quarter delay that happens on certain parts of the phrases, and that's going into a chorus. So it's kind of spreading out the delay and then going into the spring reverb. This is one of my favorite spring reverbs, this air spring. It really darkens it and just makes it moody, which I love. We have a half delay running into that spring again. I'm using the same spring reverb on some of the Adlibs in the chorus. That's running into another spring. So, never hold back on, the way that you use your reverbs. I like to run one reverb into another, or use a couple of different reverbs like a hall and a room on one vocal. It just thickens it up, adds more character. I'm rolling off the highs and lows of those springs. I'm using this Capital Chambers. as a room, and I'm using Valhalla Vintage Verb as the hall, and I'm also rolling off the lows. So just cleaning up the vocal so there's nothing muddy. What I'm doing to help the vocal cut through is I'm using track spacer. So whenever the vocals are occurring, track spacer is ducking out the effects a little bit, and this helps the vocal cut through the mix and adds a lot of clarity. So let's listen to what that sounds like.
Plenty say love is an issue until you get somehow back in a position, baby, you're the lover.
And then if I crank it,
Booty itself is a tissue. Am I gonna dismiss it? Goddamn it, now listen, you know I'm gonna
really
love it.
compresses all the effects.
So tell me you don't wanna stop, baby, what we started. Hope it really don't stop no time soon. I look up you to star, baby, it's your stage.
So that's kind of the general treatment on the lead vocal. Once I have all the vocals set, I'll sometimes go into this lead bus and then tweak it a little more, especially once all the music is in there. So we can just run through what I have going on, and we can listen to a different maybe section of the song. So I'm cutting out some of the highs here.
We'll play legs up in a peace sign. Why can't you just
Doing
be
some
mine?
more EQ
When you
with the
love,
pull tag.
when you there,
A little more de-essing, just to catch anything that I had already missed with
I'll wait till
first
this time.
de-esser.
Go all
One more
out this
de-esser.
time, just right.
So with de-essing, I really don't want to hear that happening. I want it to be super natural. So I will often use 2 or 3 de-essers so they don't work too much. It's the same concept with compression. I like to do small moves, and I'm not afraid to use a lot of plugins to get the result that I'm looking for. The last thing in the vocal chain is the L-Ray 2. So I'm just doing like 1 dB of gain reduction, and this thing really thickens up the voice. I call it vocal weight. It adds weight to the vocal and kind of just, I feel like, glues everything together. So all the leads are running into this. So if there's a couple leads happening at once, it is hitting this all together, but I find it's a great finisher for the vocal. So once I've mixed the lead vocals and kind of got those set into the music, I'll move to the backgrounds. And in this song, the backgrounds are actually doing the lyrical part of the chorus, and the leads are ad-libs, like oohs and ahs. So what I wanted to do was really make these backgrounds crisp and forward and bright. And so I did that by adding just honestly a lot of saturation, and I'll show you that chain. So first, cutting out some lows, doing some de-essing, our compressor again. Then I'm using the Fairchild. I love this on stereo backgrounds. You can really make your vocals wide, especially if you unlink the left and the right side. I'm using the machine head again, lots of drive, definitely boosting the highs. Doing that again with radiator, so I'm getting that saturation and the vocals are really starting to pop from this. And then adding some EQ, boosting the highs even more, cutting some of the lows, low mids. I'm using Spectre, boosting once again. And then finally, I'm using the shred spread that I used on the pad. And this is to just make the backgrounds really wide and really forward. So let's listen to what the backgrounds sound like with all the processing on it, and then I'll play you it completely dry.
There you go. There you go. There you go. There you go. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. There you go.
And then if we take everything off, though, I'll keep the reverb and stuff on there, and I'm gonna boost the volume because we're gonna lose a lot of level.
There you go. There you go. There you go. There you go. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
see the vocals obviously were really quiet. I'm just doing so much processing on them. I didn't need them. The dry version didn't really need to be that loud. And we're getting all the gain, all the high end, everything from this chain. Once we have the backgrounds in, I'll usually, if there are a lot of like ad-libs and things like that, I will wait to put those in until I have all the music in, and that's kind of like the last thing that I'll add in is the ad-libs. There's no rule. Sometimes I'll bring them in. There's not a lot of ad-libs in this song, so we can just check these out real quick because I probably did put these in before I went back to the music. We have some breaths here, and then we have just a couple yeahs, which we can listen to those, and I'll mute the leads. Using a doubler on the breaths, just to spread them out. And pretty much the same chain that I had on all the leads. I think I just added a spring reverb just to create a little more separation and vibe from those and the other leads and ad-libs that were going on. All right, so once I have all the vocals set, I'm moving back into the music. Close that up. And with this, there was only a couple things to add in. So there was a few effects tracks, and then I put a lot of kind of atmospheric, moody sounds, stuff that you don't really pay attention to when you're listening, but it really can fill up the music. We can take a listen to what I have in here. So those have no processing. I left them exactly how I had them when I was just producing out the track. It's just all running through this ATR 102, and that's pretty much it. It's fairly simple. We have a harp in here, which I can play you guys that as well. Boosting it 1 dB. And then we have a pad that comes in, a second pad. And this really kind of cuts through when we're in the bridge. So right here, if we go to the bridge.
We'll play. Legs up in a peace sign. Why can't you just be mine when you love?
Doing a little EQ.
I can't wait.
Just some highs.
I'll wait till it's this time.
More highs.
Go all out on this side, just right. Own up the position.
I just want to serve the song and make the song shine. I want to let the artist tell their story and find ways to make that connect sonically and bring out the emotion. So I don't mind working on something that's simple and acknowledging that that's just what the song needs. And I also don't mind spending weeks and weeks and weeks or a month working on something, you know, going down rabbit holes, trying to figure out what's going to make that song work and connect. Because at the end of the day, when you find it, for me, it's the most beautiful thing ever. So I truly enjoy the process. That's kind of my approach on music. And I hope you enjoyed this. I appreciate it. See you soon. Peace.